Well, that'd be great.
No, it's like the photographs that were taken to be enjoyed, Sven. Some people sort of sit on them and need permission. They were taken for enjoyment.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I never charged a penny for the magazines and that over the years. I never charged a penny for the use of them.
Right.
The photographs I took professionally as a job, they were totally separate.
Right.
Now, I'll start by telling you a little on the various views, if you can bear to listen
Go
to
ahead.
me.
Go on.
Brilliant.
That's Glanmire Yard. People called the Boston Pilgrims have arrived in Ireland on their way to Lourdes under Archbishop Cushing. And when I saw them, they were doing well as a bunch of pilgrims. They were all in great form. But they got 2 special trains with 2 800s with headboards on them, beautifully turned out. And they've got as far as Glanmire now. Sorry, they're going from Glanmire to Dublin. They came in on the boat. They were across the Atlantic by planes then.
All right.
Across it by liner. Now you see 2 fellas there that are relevant to the dodos. That's the cleaners.
Yeah.
Every good engine, when it came into the shed, was absolutely cleaned down. And there you have 2 on the smoke box of 802.
Right.
And the disease started with Maggie Thatcher in England with British Rail, and cleaners were done away with. And the engines eventually ran around the place filthy dirty. But there you have the condition of them as they were then in Glanmire.
That's fabulous.
Lovely.
Oh, of course, Glenmire.
And they're going now at mile a minute to Dublin, onto the mail boat and down through England on their way to Lourdes. That was the way it used to go then.
All right.
So the condition of them, and now another thing is people like me, and that we were allowed full access to go and to come, and there was no regulations or no big gates or what have you. It was very pleasant. That's totally changed, of course. So there you have it. There's only 3 or 4 photographs, and I think they're all mine, of the 3 800s together.
All right.
That's
Right.
big.
We go to the next shot. Now, that was the beautiful view. You got that's 800 backing onto the Enterprise set.
Wow.
It has been brought from Belfast. And back at that stage, it used to go into the CIE station. And 801 there, isn't it? No, it's 800 coming back and backing in. But look at the condition of her.
Fabulous.
The motion is polished. And they've used tallow in depth to get that sheen on the boiler and on the smoke box.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
It was a different world.
Mm.
So
And
John, that's
very
what's in.
much
As I was very conscious of, there are 7 beautiful coaches built in Dundalk. That to me was absolutely important. You know, the senior engineers at the company, the senior commanders, didn't seem to worry whether it was built in Belfast or Dublin. The trade advantages didn't seem to strike them.
Right.
But there were 7 coaches, I think of about 20 that they built at that time.
Wow.
And that was industry, the training of painters, the training of blacksmiths, everything fattened out. And of course, now we buy them in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah. Ha.
Brilliant.
Enniskillen. This photograph has caused an awful lot of problems. It's been used by everyone. No one ever asked me permission to use it.
Really?
But anyway, I didn't complain. It's Enniskillen with the Bundorden Express.
Wow.
That was sort of a different time, different place. The Bundorden Express will make its way through a whole series of great northern towns and eventually finish up in Amiens Street.
Wow.
Thanks,
Wow.
Sean.
Yeah.
John,
And of course, you have the good old semaphore signal with
Yeah.
a wire going down to the base
Yeah.
and off on a pulley. And when the signal man in the cabin pulls his lever, that signal will drop.
Yeah.
The signal is showing this direction. In other words, if a train appeared from this direction, that the line is blocked.
Yeah.
And it's skilling.
John, the
But
car
there we are.
must be very shortly out
Right.
of box. The
We
roof
go on
is
a
still
little
front.
bit. That's one of my favorite train views. It is, of course, by Fail. And it's the Muskerry line out of Cork, a narrow gauge which used to go north out of Cork into the forest. There was forestry all surrounding Cork on the north side. But the Muskerry eventually, towards its end, crossed my politicals. Cork City had approximately 8,000 British troops in barracks, all reasonably well paid, and nothing to do on the Saturday and the Sunday. And the Muskerry went up into the forest and passed through several villages, all of whom had a very, very nice public house.
Right.
And there was three great golf clubs in the forest. And that's why there are 2 first-class coaches in the train. That was for the nice officers and some upper-class Cork people.
There.
The rest of the train is occupied by what we call off-duty soldiers. And the terrible effort that sort of went diagonally to my train of thought, when we got our independence, all those troops were packed up and sent back to England, but no one counted the effect it had on the Muskerry on the Saturday and Sunday. Wonderful trains. They used to have 15 coaches behind that yoke.
Wow.
And 2 to 3 trains. And as I say, overnight, the British soldiers packed it up and went back to England. And it was pulling the cork out of the Muskerry's bottle.
Come on, get up there.
But it's superb. The chap leaning against the engine was later shot in an ambush against the British.
Oh, chippers.
That was the way it was in Cork, if you weren't careful.
My God. That was in Cork. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah.
Rebel County.
Any questions?
John, the motion is fascinating on the locomotive.
The locomotive was unique. And it's one of the ones, the connecting rod is inside the coupling rod. And I'm amazed that no one made a model of it, because it was quite unique. And of course, the coaches were peculiar. The side walls had a wooden panel that you slip in slots where the glass was. And this was because they were standard to ones that they built in the Indian Highlands. And that was for rifle protection.
Oh,
The Indian ones had some sort of slate that you fit into the slots.
Stop, you're disturbing.
But we didn't get that rough with them in Ireland. So they had wooden panels. And then they had glass panels on some days. Okay. Number 4. That's one of my favorite railway shots of all. Now,
Stop.
that's the brand new VS class arriving from Belfast on a rugby special 49. I think they did well that year.
Oh, yeah.
And the
Won-
train
won
was
the Triple
4
Crown.
first-class coaches.
Yeah. You got the Triple
Right.
Crown that year.
The train was
48,
composed
49.
of first-class coaches. The first 4 of them were first class. And an interesting point, I got into the train where I shouldn't have been, but the main compartment in the first class leading coach, the title for the chap who was supposed to sit on the right went whole way across the cushions to the left-hand side. And I hadn't seen a title like that going to a rugby match or a Gaelic match or that before. But this chap had his name engraved on the seat.
Oh,
Now, on the original of that, you have Mr. Wilson, the architect, is walking down the track. But I like it as a shot.
Yeah.
Very good. So fabulous.
Yeah, we go ahead. Haha. Now that's an innocent looking shot, but that's Main Street. I went to O'Connell schools, and when I got out of school, I used to walk down. We lived in Booterstown at that time to get the CIE train in Amiens Street. But of course, I always used to wait to check up what was happening on the Northern. The Enterprise is coming here 5 o'clock. Enterprise is getting ready to go. And another compound here is backed onto 12 coaches, which will be the 6 o'clock all stops to Derry. And around the station at that time, you had various people walking quietly. Some of them were customs men. The customs were dead strict, because if you got it onto the Enterprise, it got straight through to Belfast. And then you had 2 nice tall chaps in plain clothes walking around. And they were Irish officers in plain clothes. And they were looking out for the munition section of the Irish Army started to bleed out. Fellas who were experienced munition handlers at £3 a week suddenly found that their associates who deserted is a nasty word, but they deserted. No one seemed to object, because when they got to Belfast, if they with difficulty they got onto the Enterprise and got off in Belfast, and they were immediately transferred to Holland and France, where they got £50 a week instead of £3 a week.
Wow.
Trying to get all the explosives out of the ground in France and Holland.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And people saw them going, and no one said a nasty word about them, because you couldn't. They were leaving £2.10 a week for £50 a week. And incidentally, I made light checks after. I don't think any of them got blown up, because they were on the most dangerous of tasks. A whole lot of bridges in that had been loaded with explosives which hadn't been used, and they had to take all that apart. And as I say, they got £50 a week for that, plus increments.
That was a lot.
Instead of £2.10, £3 a week.
Yeah.
In the Curragh.
Big temptation.
Just before I go, we used to call one of those engines the Protestant one, and one was the Catholic one. One was a general overhaul in Dundalk, was the left-hand one, and a general overhaul, he was sent to Harlan and Wolf's in Belfast. So he had a Protestant boiler. And the funny letters written by both people at the time, the fellas in Dundalk looked at the Protestant boiler and said they know nothing about. And exactly the same comments were made by the Harlan and Wolf fellas. They were both absolutely sarcastic of the other fellas' work, which I suppose is understandable.
86
Right? Go on.
How much difference was there between the boilers?
That's probably the best tank engine in the country. And as I annoyed some of my, shall we say, slightly left-wing friends, not right-wing friends in Belfast, by claiming it as an Irish engine. Ives was the designer, and Ives was born in Inchicore, and Ives lived in Inchicore. And that didn't go down well with the best UTA traditions.
No.
But they were both beautiful engines, and they were superb performers.
Yeah.
So as I say, Ives, you're looking at Ives' engine.
Wow.
Lovely.
Wow. That's some engine, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is a good old 400, rebuilt several times. But he finished up a very straightforward, simple engine of great ability. Now, when I took the photograph, the driver and his fireman at this end pushing were worried about the fireman who was pushing at the other end. But I could see both ends, and the fireman at the other end was standing up straight having a smoke. while the two boys were pushing like hell and worrying about his health. Again, you can see the effect of the cleaner,
Yeah.
beautifully turned out,
Yeah.
to be replaced by an A-class. God forgive the mark.
Am I right, John? And that one has got Caprotti gear on it. Is that
It's got what?
Caprotti valve gear on it? Has it or not?
No, I think
One
that's
chart,
Walter.
406. 406 had,
Yeah,
the, valve, had
The
the
picture has looked a bit.
sprocket valve here.
Okay.
That's 403.
403, I think.
Yeah, go on, son.
Yeah, no, that's Walter's, yeah.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure of the connection there into the cylinder.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
This is a great favourite of mine.
Oh.
It's a line through Kerry. And obviously it's brand new because, as you see, no nettles or what have come up through the ballast.
Oh, right.
And a J15 is on his side. It's a field. It's not the sea.
Yeah.
It's a flooded field. And the bank has collapsed under the engine. And there's two 10-ton cranes, hand cranes. I don't know how they're going to lift the J15, but they feel they do it.
Just one that fell in. Look.
And you have a 52 class at this end and a J15 at this end, and they're coming to the rescue of the J15 that's gone down the hole.
Here.
But it's a beautiful shot of how these men lifted. Now, the engine down the hole would be 35 tons.
Jeepers.
And how they got him out, up and out and back on the track was an art form. They used to lift him just a tiny bit and put sleepers in under him. But I love that photograph. It's a
Fantastic. Yeah.
And that's, of course, about 1904 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Indeed. Wow.
Ha! This is Bray. And you've Bray head in the background.
Ah, look at Bray.
And this is the Rosslare. The Rosslare boat train has come in. In those days, you used to have icy conditions. You don't have them now, but
No.
an interesting point, a 670 is just peeking in on the right-hand side. And a loudspeaker over the system is saying, if you want to go to Amiens Street, cross over the bridge. And if you want to go to Harcourt Street, stay with this train.
Right.
The people, they had to make up their minds in Bray whether they wanted to continue on to Amiens Street.
That's right, yeah.
Or Harcourt Street.
Wow.
So there we are, nicely frozen up.
Yeah.
And the wheel tapper is working his way along the side there. He on a frozen day, he was absolutely necessary. And he just heard bing, bing, bing as he tapped each wheel. And when he came to needless to mark, he didn't come to a cracked one, but if he came to a cracked one, he just got bumped. You get a sharp dunk.
Mm.
Right? Ha.
Lovely.
Fantastic.
This is an oil burning woolwich. Why he's lost his white door, I don't know. But you can barely see the white ring on the tender. And of course, it's a mail. The first coach is a mail van coach. Now, that train has a great history. It's composed of 3 parts, all from Mayo and the West Coast. They used to have had to trundle up over woolwages trying to fuel on turf and various things, and suddenly they were provided with oil burners. The boiler on the woolwich was a tiny bit small, but with oil and instructions, it was a 7-point oil burner. 7 points of that 7 points of advance, and there were warnings not. The drivers were never go 6 or 7. And of course, when they get out on the road, they just push her up to 7, and they went like the clappers. But it had a bad effect on the firebox plates. But you see, the The train is 3 coaches, then a brake van, and another 3 coaches, another brake van. That's where one piece of it went on to Mayo and the other went up to the north of Mayo. In other words, that train served the whole of Mayo and the West Coast during that period. If you wanted to come to Dublin, if you were not on that train, there was not another one for 2 days. So there we are. And look at the condition of the engine too, even though it was the emergency.
It's well looked after.
Sorry?
It was well looked after.
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah.
What station is it? Where is that track?
Coming into Amiens Street.
That's coming
Yeah.
into Amiens Street. All right.
Yeah, I recognise it now.
And John,
Yeah.
roughly what year of the emergency, early or late, or?
No, the emergency, as you know, people get misled with this. The emergency in Ireland went on to 49 to 51. The war was over in 45.
Yeah.
But I'll give you a little story, which has 2 sides to it. English parties of upper class schoolboys, complete with gold braid caps and what have you, so you needn't question where they came from. They used to start to come and visit Ireland on a Saturday. And the next thing, 2 of them approached Brian Devlin and me, would we do a good turn for them? And we said, yeah. Now, production had started in England in cars and bicycles, but absolutely for export only. Any Englishman caught cycling around England on a new bicycle or a new car was in shocking trouble. They had the first form of VAT, 50% was charged to try and they started trying to pay for the war. But these 2 boys with their gold braided caps came up to us. Would we go into, what was the name of the shop in Talbot Street, and buy 2 bicycles for them?
McHugh himself.
Huh?
McHugh himself.
Hugh himself was the man who did the deal.
Yeah.
And we went in following instructions and we bought 2. Now, that shop had a complete supply of new bicycles when an Englishman couldn't touch the thing. And we were to buy 2 roadster bicycles, complete with 3-speed gears and Miller headlamps and pannier bags, the lot. So we did, we were told. I mean, we're told to get a very carefully written out receipt. And we were told to use them around and get them a bit dirty. So we did that. But we didn't realize we were taking a dreadful risk. Bicycles were being stolen a lot of the time, and they were a great object to steal, but they weren't stolen, so it didn't arise. But anyway, they arrived on a Saturday morning on the mailboat, and they checked in with Brian and myself. We had the 2 bicycles, 2 Rolls Royces, the Rally Roadster, Miller headlamps, the lot. And we had, my bill was something like £27, which was an awful quantity of money then. And Brian's was something the same. And that evening, when they were finished in Inchicore, they went out and got onto the mailboat. And we saw them marching on the Carlisle Pier, pushing their bicycles carefully and being taken apart by customs people. But they had their full receipts from 3 months previous. They had full Irish receipts. In other words, the bikes had been exported.
All right.
And off they went, absolutely delighted with their purchase. But we often thought afterwards, they never offered us a few quid or service. And if one of those bikes had been pinched, we'd been in an awful position. So there was, so that was the story of the roads, the rally roadsters.
Yeah.
You had an Irish receipt there.
John,
When I think of it afterwards, that they didn't offer us even a quid or 2 for ourselves.
Yeah, that's pretty disgraceful.
Yeah.
I reckoned you had the use of the bikes for a period of time.
A funny thing happened. Brian Devlin's father was a civil servant, and he was in the business section of the civil service. And he noticed the bicycles in his front garden. And we got a request for 2 months later for 6 bicycles on the same system. And Mr. Devlin put his big foot in the way and said,
No way.
no way, if they want to pay you 40% expenses, and if they put cash down and relieve you of any responsibilities, you're on. Otherwise, tell them to, well, on this panel, I won't say what he told me to say.
Procreate somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Very good. Very good.
Right, we go on, Sean. Huh? Is that the whole lot of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Very, very good. Thank you very much for the pitch.
I thought there was more than that.
It was 11.
11. Very good.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, John.
Yes,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Brilliant.
Well
Thank you, John.
done.
Thank you
Brilliant.
very
Well
much.
done.
Thank you for
all the stories.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
We had great fun, but the greatest one is Amiens Street which you could describe now. You know, schoolboys, when you have officials knocking round a station or that, funny enough, the schoolboys know exactly who they are.
Yeah.
And some of these individuals were customs, and some of them were the nice 2 gentlemen, well dressed, were from the British Army, and their job was to get the 2 characters into the forefront of the enterprise and lock the compartment so that the Irish officers couldn't get to them. And we knew who both teams were. We knew exactly who they were. But as I say, the thing, although they were deserting, it wasn't pushed that much because everyone was aware that they had taken a choice to put their lives at risk and get £50 a week instead of 3, which no one could argue with.
no. Why wouldn't you?
So there. And as I say, none of them were blown up. So
John, can I ask you a question there?
Yeah.
The Cork and Macroom, John, was it always narrow gauge? It was never standard
Cork
gauge.
and Muskerry.
Cork and Muskerry, sorry.
Cork and Muskerry.
Yeah.
It was 3-foot gauge, and it was quite long.
Right.
And of course, it had 3 branches. You know, it was quite extensive.
Oh.
And an army of coaches. And as I say, on the Saturday, in the last 3 years of its life, full of off-duty British soldiers with plenty of money in their pockets. And if I can whisper, sort of a lot of women had come to occupy the area. We won't go into where they came from, where they went. But they were balanced parties going out to Coachford. And a great time was had by all. They were shot to pieces by our War of Independence when the 8,000 British soldiers were parcelled up and sent home. I don't know how quickly the women went with them, but anyway, that was the way it was played.
The Muskerry line also went to Blarney.
It went to Blarney, yeah.
And it also went out to a place called New Tipperary, which was out in, as you say, in the middle of the forests.
That's
and
it.
That branched at a place called Tower from the Blarney line. The reason I know is because I grew up at the end of the New Tipperary line.
Yeah.
And there was a little turntable there, and they had a little wagon shed at the top, and that's where they stored the wagons for the morning run.
Yeah. Someone told me, I was looking at a working sheet belonging to it. 4 locomotives had to be steamed up in the morning for the dawn run. These would be the runs going into Cork, which would start with 2 of them and then double heading. As the other engines brought in their little loads from the branch lines, and they were shoved on the main train. So eventually you would have 10 or 12 coaches and 2 engines. Quite a railway performance.
Yeah.
So there we are.
And
Those
that-
iPad Paul Cahill. Yeah.
That's me.
The terminus in Cork, was that at UCC?
No, that was out on West Road, well
West
out
Road.
of the city.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And the bones of it could be seen up till comparatively recently. The Western Road was a great big highway shooting out of Cork into an upper class area. And funny enough, it was heavily surrounded by churches of various colours and very large houses.
Okay.
And that area completely dissolved with independence. A lot of the residents of these very, very big houses, they decided to push off. But there we are.
And there's a great picture as well of the where a train hit a steamroller
Yeah.
out on the Carrigrán Strait. Which
And they had a hell of a thing for the insurance, trying to prove that they weren't racing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the insurance didn't pay eventually because he decided they were racing.
No way.
And there was a good old roller, a Fowler roller, I think, which would be slow, would be a bit slower, as slower than some other rollers.
Yeah, I can't see how the steamroller could have kept up with it, but it's a famous picture. The Examiner has it.
The front pinion of the roller collapsed, and the front of the boiler went down into the ground, and the thing slewed around to the left and pierced the coach. A great time was had by all.
And then your man Audrey wrote it into one of the Thomas the Tank Engine stories.
Very good.
Very good. That was brilliant.
Well, how many have I looking in? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 16.
You have 20 according to the bottom.
I say.
Yourself and 19 others.
This is where these old machines overrule everyone. Everything you say, they tell you you're wrong.
So you have a bigger audience now than you get in the kitchen in the clubhouse, because we can fit the 20 people around the table.
Very good. Well, we didn't get onto any models, but we stayed with the prototypes.
Yeah, here.
You're brilliant, John. Thank you.
Sean, can I ask you a question, please?
Of course.
The last photograph you showed there, there's the train approaching us, and on the left-hand side, there is a point. And on either side of the junction of the point, there are 2 little platforms.
Which locomotive are we talking about?
The one coming in from the west.
In Damien Street.
This one?
Damien Street.
Damien Street.
The one on the main.
There you are.
That's it there. On the bottom.
That's a lovely double. That's a lovely double slip for any of you who are into track work.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a full double slip.
The 2 little platforms
which allows you
on either side of it. What are they?
There's one in front of the train itself.
That's right.
Yeah, but there's not another platform.
No, it's not a platform, just a little raised area. Looks like a detector of some description. Yeah, there.
Yeah.
That's the platform.
2 of them.
That's the main platform.
No, the little ramps in the forefoot, John.
Yeah, that's protecting point levers and signal levers will be passing under the track. You can see them out further to the left, and you can see it further to the left.
Yeah.
That's signal cables and what have you.
John, is that partly to protect the signal cables from any couplings lying down, or is that to protect signalmen walking across?
It could be. Drivers could get into awful trouble by leaving the couplings hanging. And I got a great demo of that in Kildare station, where I was a guide to a British party, and because of the fuel troubles, they dug pits between the rails so that they could get under it to clean the fire. But this express, and it was a Woolwich too, came from Dublin. And the next thing, in horror, I recognised at 100 yards or 200 yards that the front coupling was swinging gloriously in its full length. And one of the party had positioned his twin lens reflex on the ground in the middle of the track. He was going to release it by some sort of radio or cable. And the next thing I saw, the coupling swinging like hell. And I said a Hail Mary or something like that. And the coupling hit the camera and put the pieces of it, spread them all over the scenery.
Oh, Lord.
So a 60-mile-an-hour woolage coming towards you with a left to right swinging coupling, plus his impetus front to back, is not the thing to get your twin lens reflex a little tap.
Exactly.
And especially, I'm sure if the screw of the coupling loosened itself down, it's quite.
It did, yeah. It was down to its limit.
Yeah.
Oh, someone had missed out.
Damage.
Yeah, what about 501?
He wasn't in your.
Yeah, I know. It's not important, Jackie.
All right.
Not important. They can see it at a later date.
Save him for another week.
It's given for another week. She's talking me into more trouble.
Excellent.
Want to hear it. Want to hear all the stories.
John, is one of those 800s, is that one that's in Coltra at the moment? You know, that's up in Coltra.
There's only 3 800s.
Yeah, but one of those 3 on your first picture is in Coltra now.
That's right. Yeah, Maeve 800.
Yeah. No, I just wondered if it was one of the same that they hadn't actually gone and
no, they only
overhauled them and changed them and that. Yeah.
No, they only had 3 of them.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a thing that's not reported much. When the 800s were built, the great joke on British Rail and Continental Rail was the mail train running under contracts. You had these trains coming into London and various other places under contracts. They had to observe time or they paid a penalty. And crossing the Atlantic, the liners were given 5 days or 5.5 days. And they had a guarantee that any letters aboard would be posted on the first post in London on the 7th day. Now at this time they were developing a plane in America, which you know as the Liberator bomber, but it was developed as a civil plane in 1942, and it broke all the rules. Planes then couldn't take off because of the wind, couldn't take off because of the rain. The Liberator made a statement, I take off under any conditions. And he did, whether it became a bomber or a civil plane. And that completely destroyed all these transatlantic contracts. The Liberator could cross the Atlantic in 5 hours, 6 hours. Wow. Irrespective of weather or irrespective of wind. And all the contracts for the mail liners and the planes all collapsed. But the only extra I'd put to the tail of that is that in the liner taking 6.5 days to cross the Atlantic, you got your post on the first post on the 7th day in London. They then replaced it with this aircraft, this absolutely wonderful aircraft, which crossed the Atlantic in 6 to 7 hours. Oh. And the letters that they were carrying, much like them, took 14 days. Now you worked that one out.
14 days.
You've got the point.
Wow.
The letters in this new form of transport couldn't hell out of the travel times. Today takes 14 days and maybe 16 days.
No. Amazing.
And the liner ship, the envelopes in him were guaranteed to be posted on the 7th morning. So someone is a little confused.
Somebody is not at all confused, and someone is making sure that a point is made.
Absolutely. But anyway, that's the Liberator became, when you read that a Liberator took off from London at 3 o'clock in the day and sank a submarine on the coast of Oslo in the whatever the ocean is, I've forgotten, the little one that goes up. Yeah.
Jagger.
And was back in base as the light finished of the evening. I mean, that's unbelievable. It just took off on a patrol from London and was up in the Baltic and sank a submarine and was back at his base before
For
midnight.
tea.
Wow.
I mean, that was the way.
Complain.
That was done in the interest of war. You can do great things in the interest of war, but however, but the fact that a plane could take off in London and do a work job on the borders of Sweden and be back on his digs at 9 o'clock.
That was extraordinary.
Yes.
But anyway, it was the reliability of the Liberator which said, I take off irrespective of weather or irrespective of wind, that finished all those contracts.
It reminds me of
Prior to that, there were.
story, John.
Pardon?
It reminds me of Tony Miles' story as a submariner in the Second World War in the Mediterranean. He said that the Luftwaffe, the Italian Air Force couldn't get them, the RAF couldn't get them, but the Americans almost did.
Guess what?
Tony Miles in his submarine.
Yeah, but
they were depth charged twice by American aircraft.
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you. No, I missed that little bit. Yeah, I wouldn't mind taking part in various armed goings on, but sitting in a submarine on the sandy base being depth charged is not one of the nicest.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Yeah.
And Tony Miles was fairly normal. That sort of surprised me. He was a normal individual building very fine models. 30 years later.
Yeah.
And he should have been going around with the screaming ninjas.
Extraordinary.
He was very sane and very intelligent.
How few German crews would have survived the war. But I know of 5 German companies in the north of Germany in packing materials and packing machinery that were actually started by ex-U-boat commanders. Now, the odds of those number of people surviving the war is quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
Coincidental, 5 separate individual family-owned companies started by ex-U-boat commanders.
Well, I feel a little story about the fella coming in saying to Dunleary Harbour and putting a sub on the bottom to go and do some spying or something in Dunleary. And if that was me, I'd be coming back and I couldn't remember where I'd actually put the submarine on the. Where did I put the fucking boat?
You and your model of Bismarck, Sean.
Absolutely the same again. Yeah.
Very good.
He's probably still steaming away into the horizon somewhere.
You'll have to tell the story, John.
Huh?
You'll have to tell the story to everybody else.
About what? The Bismarck?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I had a 6-foot model of the Bismarck. It would be slightly crude on today's standards, but it had a full steam engine room. That was quite brilliant. But we brought it into Dunleary Harbour on one day when the yachts were having a day out, and he fired a broadside, and all the yachts started out in a race. We had to turn him round quietly and bring him out of the harbour before we were arrested. So tragically then, the radio gear at the time wasn't the most reliable. And when he came out around the head of the harbour and put his nose down, he was going the wrong way. And we were guiding him from a canoe. And the two of us in the canoe were ex-athletes. So we put in the oars and we went like a rocket after it. But about a quarter of an hour's hard going, we had to ease off. That he was pulling away from us. And we watched ads in the Model Engineer and that on the Welsh coast for months afterwards, and that, but it never appeared. And that was, I never built a second ship. No, one was enough.
What had you fitted to it as guns, John?
Pardon?
What guns had you fitted to it?
2.2s. 2.2. We had somewhere or other someone picked up 5 or 6 retired 2.2s, So we chopped them up and machined the outside, and they made lovely turrets. They were dead scale, but we could only load them once.
Yeah. At
harbour side. We had no way of reloading them. So they went out anyway, and they started one senior yacht race. Beautiful. And the next thing, we had to put them to the harbour mountain. We're on full speed. And all the yachts were passing us by.
So you're actually saying that the Irish Navy had another vessel they weren't aware of?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So there.